there, Eagles fans, and welcome back to our Eagles Therapy Podcast. My name is Basil.
And I'm Baz.
And we are recording, what is it, Dad? Sunday, April 21st?
First.
Yep, 2024. Been a while since we recorded. Last episode came out 10 days ago, so we recorded about 11 days ago. So
Right.
been a while. That's our longest time without recording. I went on a little trip to Phoenix to visit some family, so didn't record during that time, and then it took us a little bit to get back into it when I got back.
Yeah.
We do feel bad, though, because a lot of news happened while we
There
were
is,
gone.
but it was kind of like our bye week. So
That's the thing. It was our bye week. We wanted to get in a break before the draft
you
because
just get one though.
We wanted to get a break in before the draft because we're probably going to be recording, probably Tuesday or Wednesday. You know what I mean?
Well, we got pre-draft, post-draft.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
So we're going to be probably recording 2 or 3 times this next week or so, depending on what happens. Because each day there's going to be 3 days. There's 3
Right.
days of the draft, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Day 1, day 2, day 3. So I know we're not going to talk after every single one, but unless something else crazy happens, we will have to. So
It's going to be a big trade. So
at some point,
I mean, I have some inside information, but I'm not going to keep that to myself.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, there's just no way. I don't think there's any chance we walk out of there drafting 2 guys in the second round. One of those is going to be traded away,
Right.
maybe for a third round, maybe for another thing.
Trade up in the first, trade down in the first, pick up an extra third. Who knows?
That's the thing. You never know.
It's going to be.
You never
Depends
know.
how it falls. And again,
Yeah.
we've had some other fans contacting us about certain players, and we've kind of, just kind of went back and forth. And in my opinion, I think we'll probably either trade up to get that guy, or we're going to trade down, which as long as we get that guy. But I'm just hoping the other teams make errors and pick QBs early, and kind of the draft always gets thrown off every year. So you can look at 10 mocks, but it's going to get thrown off. Somebody's going to get that player that somebody goes, whoa, what happened there? And then it changes the entire draft. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and get into it. As always, before we start, want to give a shout out to the Philadelphia Eagles fan club in Colorado Springs that we are a part of. We watch every Eagles game at Frankie's on Powers and Galley. We were just there yesterday to watch the Sixers game, which I'll touch on as well. But we'll be there for the draft on Thursday, just for day 1. Hope to see you all there. When, like I said again, at Frankie's on Powers and Galley. But let's get into it. Dad, the Eagles signed CJ Uzomah, a tight end, to a 1-year contract. CJ was drafted back in 2015, so he's got a pretty long career so far, going in his 10th season, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Going in his 10th season, so that's good to get some experience out there. He's had a lot of reception in his career, 192 for 1,800 yards, 16 touchdowns. Not a big yardage guy, not a big touchdown guy. Kind of always been the number 2. He was also on some pretty bad teams. He was on the Jets last year, and then before that, he was on the Bengals his whole career.
Wow.
But the thing about Bengals, they kept him for 9. He was with the Bengals for 8 years. So they liked him.
He went to the Super Bowl with him.
Right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, you're right. In his last year, and that was his best year. A couple of years ago in 21, he had 493 yards, 5 touchdowns. Again, not big tight end 1 numbers, but seems like a pretty reliable guy out in the field. Not a lot of drops in his career. He's just not out there to run routes very much. But if he can be another blocking tight end on the outside, and he's on a pretty cheap deal, I'm totally okay with that. What do you think?
Well, all we need from a tight end number 2 is to be able to step into if Goddard gets injured, but also maybe 20 receptions on the season.
Yeah.
1 or 2 a game, maybe get us 25, 30 receptions. For 25 yards, just that element of surprise, that extra player that they're not looking for. Maybe grab a few cheap touchdowns, maybe a couple 5 or 10 yard TDs where they're looking everybody else, and that's what you need. That's the kind of team we got to build. And we've had the tight end, 2 tight ends in occasionally, but usually it was Stoll blocking somebody on it, and when he was in motion or something like that. So I think it's a good move. Like you say, as long as it's a friendly deal. Cap-wise, money-wise.
I think it's an incredibly low-risk deal, or low-risk move.
Yeah, it's got to be.
It's nothing that's going to hurt us in the long run, but it's also just, it's very likely he doesn't even make the team. What would you give his chances on making the team?
Well, I think they're pretty good. What do we got? 3 tight ends now, maybe 4, right?
Yeah,
we got the guy from Denver.
3 on the roster, Alberto, and then there's probably
there's
going to be some guys on the practice squad who are on the team during the offseason.
But I mean, it kind of the good thing is, especially if they think he can be somewhat of a threat to catch 20 or 30 balls this season.
Yeah.
Then we don't have to go try fishing for a tight end in the draft this year.
Yeah.
Again, we still need a tight end eventually.
At some point,
a younger tight end. So,
Yeah.
But that's another type of thing where you could pick up somebody that's not drafted this year and he turns out to be a surprise, or you've probably got your top 10 list of tight ends, and maybe number 7 doesn't get drafted. So
yeah, it's true.
Pick them up.
Sometimes it happens. I know it's weird,
for sure.
Especially in years like this year, it's a huge quarterback draft and a huge wide receiver draft and defensive back and linemen and everything like that. So sometimes it's defensive drafts. Like last year was a big defensive draft.
Yes.
But this year it's big on offense. So they're expecting a defensive player to not be.
And there's
taken
only
until
so
the
many picks,
pick.
as we know. There's only 7 rounds now, so it's not like they've got unlimited picks. So that's the thing. If you think you can pick this guy up. We'll see what happens the day after we draft. After the draft's over and who we sign.
Exactly.
Basically.
We also forgot Calcaterra. I'm sorry. He's also.
I did mention his name.
You did?
Yeah,
okay,
I
I'm
did.
sorry. So like 4 or 5 guys. Togi is also here and everything like that.
Right.
So, but yeah, we'll see about him. I think it's, like I said, a low risk, good move. But let's jump over to the big news, the big ticket. And of course, we know this happened a while ago, but we got to say our piece.
Right.
Devonta Smith. They exercised his 5th-year option and extended him, so he's going to be set to be with us through 2028 now. And that extension is a 3-year, $75 million contract. What you thinking there? Pretty exciting.
He's making $25 million a year now.
Yep.
Wait. The math doesn't add up, does it?
No.
He's playing for us for the next 5 years.
But it's on a 3-year extension.
Yeah. So it's so funny to. When they first signed, I dug to try and figure out what it really ended up being. The latest I saw was a 5-year, $97 million. So he's still under $20 million a year for the next 5 years. So he's getting $25 million a year, but not till 2026.
I know. Yep.
Which is 2 seasons from now.
Correct.
By then, the quarterbacks are going to be making $100 million, and the best wide receivers in the league are going to be making $50 million a year.
Yeah.
So what a brilliant signing.
Great signing.
It's so funny how teams right away. Oh my gosh, you guys have 2 $25 million a year wide receivers. They're not that good. Your tandem's maybe in the top 15. This team's got a better 1-2 punch, and this team has a better 1-2 punch. And it's just so funny how the reactions are, because at the time I'm sitting there thinking, he's going to be getting $25 million, but we got 2 seasons with him making, I think, 20 the next 2 years. So $10 million a year the next 2 years. Great move for him. He got $50 million, plus $51 million in his pocket.
Yeah.
To put in the bank and
plus the salary cap we talked about. The salary cap
yeah.
is at $255 million, and it's only going to keep going up.
It's going to be $310 million in the next 2 seasons, guaranteed.
I completely would agree with you there.
And we've got Hurts signed. You've got your wide receiver signed.
Well, you got your left tackles. You got your left guard.
You've
got Cam Jurgens is still on his rookie deal.
That's right.
It's
the big money
Tyler
players
Steen's on
have
his rookie
been
deal.
extended. Right, I agree. And it's going to be then whoever you draft this year, you have for first rounds, but
4 years,
you have in 5 years if you do the option. So I mean, as far as money wise goes, this is what Howie does. He may not be the greatest drafting, but he definitely knows how to work the cap in our favor, because a team that goes to the Super Bowl a year and a half ago should not be, $40 or $50 million under the cap.
I know,
you know what I mean?
Incredible.
So
it's incredible.
Amazing.
He's definitely one of the best at playing with that cap.
So I think it's a fantastic signing. I don't think we've seen his ceiling it yet for Brown. I mean, for Smith at all. So
no, not at all.
It just keeps getting better and better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you there. Good signing. Let's talk about the draft. We're not going to go too much into it, but we'll talk about some of our thoughts on it, because we'll probably record, a pre-draft episode like we said. It seems like, Dad, from the press conference that Howie Roseman had, we're going to be drafting an offensive lineman.
It definitely looks like it, yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's never a bad idea. It's actually always a great idea.
Well, it's one of our things. Always draft the lineman early.
Yeah,
every year.
Yeah, it's one of those things that just kind of makes you go, you were kind of hoping for that flashy,
sexy as
pick.
I say.
Yes,
we want that sexy pick.
I know you. And
the top cornerback in
exactly
from the last year's college.
Yes, I know you and I are big on getting a cornerback this year. Later rounds, getting a wide receiver and everything. But that first round, we were really set on hopefully getting that cornerback.
Well, you hate it when you see remember Sauce when he came out, right? And he was highly touted, and he did his. Not disappointed once. He's been phenomenal.
Incredible. Yeah.
And there's every year you have that 1 or 2 top cornerbacks, and the Eagles always we always say, oh, we're not going to draft that. We don't do that. Well, one year you're going to have to. I mean, now the price you pay is if you whiff on that pick, then you're in big trouble. But
absolutely.
I mean, it would be phenomenal if we could get one of the top 3 corners drafted this year.
Absolutely.
I don't know how we do it. Trade up, trade down, whatever you got to do. But
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's that obvious first corner is going to be Quinyon Mitchell. Everyone knows about that.
Yes.
After that's the other Alabama guy, Terrion Arnold.
And we got the Kool-Aid dude.
And then after that, there's a couple mixed together with Nate Wiggins, Kool-Aid,
right.
Cooper DeJean, and everything like that.
Exactly.
I would love any one of those three guys, but it just seems like we're going offensive linemen. So I'm gonna go over the offensive linemen who I think we're most likely to be picking.
Well, I think that the perfect scenario for me too, and I know we talked about it a little bit before, is if one of those top three linemen that we were talking about, probably heir apparent to Lane down the road, would be to be able to actually trade down a few picks, still get them in the first round, so we have that fifth-year option, but then maybe get something else out of it. Yes,
get a third rounder for this year. Use that third rounder to get Trotter. There we go.
Exactly.
Let's talk about some of those O-linemen, though. So there's two different scenarios that I see most likely happening. Number one would be the trade up or sit and pick. These two guys, I'm going to say they're about where we're drafting. They could be a little before, they could be a pick after.
Right.
So I could see us trading up one or two picks, or maybe even sitting exactly where we are. This would be Troy Fatanu and Graham Barton. Troy Fatanu, him and Graham Barton are similar in the sense that they're both offensive linemen and tackles who most likely will be playing interior offensive linemen in the league. But they could move out to offensive tackle.
Which is what we're looking for.
Exactly.
Especially if he's on the right side.
One's from Washington, one's from Duke. Fatanu from Washington, Barton from Duke. I could see this going forward just because we could draft one of these guys to be the right guard this year if they don't, if they're not a big fan of Tyler Steen.
Right.
We don't know. Draft him to play right guard this year, and then after a year or two, I think Lane has 2 more years, move him out to right tackle. I don't know. That's kind of what the thought was with Landon Dickerson.
Right.
When they drafted him, they thought, he'll be the center going forward after Kelsey retires.
Right.
Well, then Kelsey stayed on longer, and then Landon became such a great left guard. It was like, well, we're not even going to mess with this. He's too good. Why move him?
Yeah, he's already played 2 years in the NFL and
that's
at a high level, and he's been trained.
Yes.
And he's working well with Mailata out there on the left side.
That's the thing. Why change that?
Yeah, you don't want to mess it.
So I could see that happening with one of those two guys, drafting him to be the guard. Then he's the tackle going forward, or he's too good at guard that you don't even move him, and we draft a tackle again next year. I don't know.
Right. No, but I mean that's the way it works. Yeah. But you got to always have 6, 7, 8 linemen. You got to have them out there just in case somebody gets nicked up or hit or something. So it's going to work out. But now who's the number one offensive tackle coming out this year? I know you've mentioned his name,
Joe Alt.
So we're going to keep our eye on where he goes.
Well, he's going to go probably. What they expect is he's going to Tennessee, which is 7th overall.
Right.
And that's like on all the mock drafts and all the projections. They're like Joe Alt is going Tennessee, and there's not even another option for Tennessee to draft. They have to get a lineman.
I mean, that's the good thing about this year's draft, but it's the same thing every year. Oh, this guy's going to definitely go 1. This guy's going to go 2. This guy's going to, and then you kind of start going, okay, well, looks like maybe that third cornerback is going to drop to the 20th pick or in the 20 picks.
Oh yeah. Well, I remember in 2021, everyone thought that Bengals were going to be drafting Penei Sewell. They thought everyone was like, they're going to be drafting Penei Sewell. They got Burrow last year. They need a guy to protect him. They drafted Jamar Chase.
Right.
And it was
was a good pick.
And it was like, whoa, yes. Which was a great pick because he's amazing. But it was mine. Everyone was like, oh my God, like they just drafted a wide receiver. Like everyone expected.
And it throws that monkey wrench into the draft.
It changes everything.
You start going, I think we had an early pick a couple years ago in the top. But 10,
it's been a while.
9, 11.
We picked 9th and 10th. Well, last year we had someone else's pick, Saints pick, to have 2 top 10. Or sorry, to have 2 first rounders.
Right.
We had the Saints pick, and then
we traded.
Man, before that though, we haven't had a top 10 pick in a bit. Maybe we had maybe an 8th or a 10th at some point. I don't remember.
Well, in 2019, 2020, we were pretty bad as far as record goes.
Yeah.
But then we also had
2020,
the trade that we gave up a couple.
So 21, we drafted Devonta 10th overall.
10th overall, which we traded up.
We traded up. We had the 13th or 12th.
Yeah, we hopped over.
We hopped over the Giants.
Giants.
We traded with Dallas to get in front of the Giants.
The Giants dropped. They got Micah. We got.
Speaking of, I saw a great video the other day of like that reaction when we drafted Devonta, and it was a Giants fan watching the draft.
Right.
And he's like watching, and he's like, all right, we're about to be up soon. And then he's like, all right, Dallas is up. And then he's like, wait. And he sees, and he's like, why did Dallas trade the Eagles? Why is Dallas trading to the Eagles? What are they doing? Why does Philly taking this pick? And he's like, oh my, they're going to take Devonta. Like he knew it.
Right.
It was so funny. He's like, they're going to take Devonta. And he takes, and he just flips.
Yeah.
That was hilarious.
Well, I'm guessing that they needed a wide receiver at the time.
And that's why we jumped over them.
And of course, they ended up the Cowboys ended up getting Micah, which at the time we were like, well, if
that
this
sucks.
guy's gets but we knew they were going to take him anyway, so we had to trade with them, or they still would have got him.
Yeah.
So this way, it gave us an opportunity to jump over
get
the
Devonta.
Giants.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the other thing was the Giants. We had to avoid getting Devonta. They ended up getting
Trading down.
No, they ended up drafting where they were, I think. But who did they draft? That wide receiver out of Florida, the guy who's on the Kansas City. The guy.
Yeah, but
I can't
think
think of his name.
I think they traded down to get him.
I don't believe so.
Maybe
What's his name though?
To 19.
Tony.
Yes.
They drafted Kadarius Toney,
yes.
which is funny because for those of you out there, you're not going to believe it, but you were there. They drafted Kadarius Toney, and I went, oh, crap.
Yeah, you really liked him.
Because I watched it at Florida with Kyle Pitts and Kyle Trask,
yes.
and I was like, oh, my God, he's so good. He's going to kill us. This is going to be rough. And it's funny because then his New York Giants career was horrible.
Yes.
They traded him
So
to
he
Kansas
didn't kill
City.
us then,
He
did
didn't kill us. Then they traded to Kansas City, and then the Super Bowl.
Then he killed us.
He killed us. And I was like,
had the punt return. Yes.
Freaking knew it.
Yes.
And I it's just funny how I
funny
said
how,
it.
Well, it's
It
funny
was
how
just
it
a different.
works.
It was
Yes.
It was a different way, but he did kill us. But yeah.
But yeah, look that up. I think the Giants traded down and got him like 19th. I don't know who they traded with, but I would look up either Toney, and he was like 19th pick overall, I think.
Let's see.
By the Giants, maybe 20 something.
He was the 20th. So you're right. They did trade
traded
back.
down. Yeah,
they did
I
trade
remember
back.
that.
Okay.
And again, I just remember that because that's not what they wanted to do.
No, they did.
And
not.
I remember you were saying Toney was a great player in college.
Yeah.
He just had his issues with the Giants early on.
Isn't that funny? They traded with Chicago, and Chicago ended up using that 11th pick to
get
draft
Sewell.
Justin Fields.
Oh.
Isn't that funny?
Okay.
Isn't that hilarious? And
Yeah.
they went back to 20th and got Kadarius Toney.
Right.
Isn't that funny how it works?
And now Fields has been traded for like a 6th round pick or something.
Crazy.
Bad.
And then Micah was drafted next. Yep.
Yep. Mike is
Boo.
great.
The other scenario I have most likely to happen would be trading back for Jackson Powers Johnson. Jackson Powers Johnson, another player similar to the other guys I talked about. He's going to be an interior offensive lineman. He's most likely going to be a guard from Oregon.
Okay.
He's almost 6'4", 6'3", 6'4", so he's in that range where he could be a tackle, but he'll most likely be hanging out at the guard spot.
Well, it's funny how we always do that. The tackles are 6'5", the guards are 6'2", 6'3", centers are 6'1", 6'2". Yeah, so.
Yeah, which is, speaking of, I have some stuff to go over in the next segment, but it's kind of funny.
But if he's got speed, we can use him as a tackle. So.
No, absolutely. I mean, if he's got speed, you can use him anywhere. You know.
True. That's true.
But he's most likely going to just be an interior offensive lineman, so I could see us trading back to get him, and then using the 2nd round pick. If we had 3 2nd round picks or a third, that could be where we attack the linebacker position, maybe another cornerback, maybe another defensive end, something.
Well, that's where I'm at. I'm always wrong anyway. So, but I'm big on we need a linebacker. I want to get a linebacker that's a name that's a top in the top 5 or 10 range. You know how they always predict. Oh, he's going to be this and that. So I'm hoping we get one of the sexy linebackers coming out. Obviously we need corner linemen. They're not sexy, but that's how you win games. So
my big fear would be the Peyton Wilson. I know a lot of people are looking at him and they big fans of him, and he's a kind of the best linebacker in the draft, most likely, kind of assumed to be the top 1 or 2. He's assumed to be the first linebacker taken in the draft in the 2nd round.
And that's the good thing about this year's draft. What I'll be watching is where some of these players go.
Yeah.
Like hopefully one of the top tight ends goes early, right? So that kind of makes another player drop down into our pot so we can see what we're going to do with them. I mean, 20 seconds, not a great place to be picking because you're not getting one of the top players, but
it's all about finding value at that point.
That's exactly right. It's all about, it doesn't matter. We know 6th round picks can be Hall of Famers, and we know 1st round picks are busts
all the time.
A large part of the time. So
I mean, I'm looking at the 2021 draft now, and it's just Zach Wilson was a 2nd overall pick. That's insane.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Trey Lance. Well, it blows my mind. Justin Fields.
I love looking at that and seeing who made an All-Pro. Who made.
21 was a big,
kind of neat.
Pretty big draft as far as some good players. Trevor Lawrence is in there.
Right.
Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell, Jalen Waddle. He hasn't even made a Pro Bowl, but he's a great player.
Yeah, he's a great player.
Patrick Surtain, Devonta Smith.
Yes.
Micah Parsons, and then there's some other names there.
Right.
But then there's some names like Mac Jones and
Zach
Wilson.
It's just
and Elijah Vera Tucker and stuff like that. But
I mean, it's really crazy being a big NFL fan. I watch. The draft is huge. You go back 5 years and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe we drafted that guy.
Always.
That's why it's so funny. My wife was like, oh, you guys are going to go watch the draft. I'm not going. I think the draft's stupid. I'm like, well, I mean, it is, but when you're a big fan, that's where it all begins.
It is stupid, but it is great.
I mean, it is. It is.
It's
it's funny
things.
how as a kid, when I was young, the draft was, held in the gymnasium of a high school somewhere.
Yeah.
And these guys were on the phone, smoking cigarettes and cigars. And you know what I mean? Like looking at the draft board was names on it, kind of like how you make your draft when you do your fantasy draft.
Yep.
Little medals on a thing.
Magnets.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
Taping it on, stuff like that.
And now it's just so high tech and they still screw it up. That's the thing that gets me.
It's pretty incredible how much you can miss. It's insane.
Just
Mahomes wasn't the first quarterback drafted in his draft.
Yeah.
Like it's
how many millions of dollars each team invests?
Oh yeah.
And
their scouting department.
You and I sometimes could go, well, I would have picked that guy. We should have picked him.
Yeah.
I mean, and we didn't. Why didn't we get this guy?
It's funny.
Why did we get a 26-year-old lineman? It's just silly stuff.
Fireman Danny.
It's crazy.
Let's go ahead and jump off the draft. We're excited for it, though. We'll do another pre-draft process where we say our final thoughts, final expectations on every pick, and who we might be drafting.
And maybe make some predictions. We'll write them down and see if we're right or wrong.
Exactly. Yeah, I like to have that. That's a good idea. But let's go ahead and jump over into Eagles' historic season talk. So we both chose a season again, where we're going to talk about it a little bit and see, just kind of talk about the history of the Eagles in some way and sort of the NFL too. But Dad, I'll hand it over to you to start. I know you're excited.
Okay, definitely. Okay. Do you want me to give the year right away or let it go?
Let's wait for it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this season I picked this time. The Eagles still played at Franklin Field, and the coach was still Joe Kahurich. He was still the head coach.
Okay.
We finished 9-5. We were second this particular season in the NFC East. I forget what they called
NFL
it.
Eastern?
Yeah, they called it the NFL Eastern. I didn't write that down, but we had a couple Pro Bowlers. Bob Brown was the right tackle. He was also an All-Pro, so he was a pretty amazing player. He ended up being a Hall of Famer. And then Floyd Peters. In this particular season, we rushed 19 rush touchdowns, which was more rushing touchdowns than any of the other teams in the Eastern Division. You got to remember, there's only two divisions back then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see. Number 22, Tim Brown became a member of the 10,000-yard club in this particular year. Now, he was an amazing player, drafted in the early 60s, and he had a great career with the Eagles. This was the last year of the NFL versus the AFL in the draft. So in those days, both leagues drafted players, and you can still look it up if you look up some of the players. He'll say he was the number 2 player overall in the NFL draft, and he was the number 4 player picked in the AFL draft. And back in those days, because of Philly and because of the money that the AFL was throwing around, there was a lot of picks that we lost. Guys that ended up becoming Hall of Famers. I think one of them was Otis Taylor in this particular draft. He went to the Chiefs. Played with them for 9-10 years, but really it was really tough. But in this particular season, it was the first year the Atlanta Falcons were an expansion team.
Oh wow!
And we ended up playing them one of the games. We didn't play them twice because they weren't in our division.
Yeah.
But, we did sweep the Giants and the Steelers, so the Steelers were still in the NFL at the time, not the AFL or the AFC as it is now.
Yeah.
We split with the Cardinals, we split with the Cowboys, we split with the Redskins, and we split with the Browns, which is funny because the Browns, of course, are also an AFC team in the same division that the Steelers are in. So it's kind of a shame that a lot of these teams that were NFC teams had to move to the AFC. And, a lot of them really were old school teams that didn't want to, just for history reasons, you know. It was a 14-game season. We did have a Week 12 bye week that particular year, which is strange because as I was looking up the seasons, I didn't even realize that we had bye weeks back in those days. I thought the bye week didn't start till like the 90s, which really surprised me. So I had to do a little history on that. I was talking with Steve last night about it, but it appears that some of the seasons in the 40s, they had a couple bye weeks. You were looking at one there.
Yeah.
They had Week 1 bye and a Week 3 bye, but I looked at one season where they had the first 4 weeks of the season they had a bye. Week 1, Week 2, Week 3, and Week 4. They didn't play.
What?
They didn't have to play their first game until like September 29th that particular season.
Oh my gosh!
Which kind of blew me away. But it had to be war related or something.
Yeah.
I think it was 43 or 42, but I think it was 43. But so from 1950 to 1966, they had an established bye week, and then in 1966, which is this year that I'm talking about for the 1966 Eagles. The bye week was ended this particular year, and they didn't pick it up again until 1990. So for you NFL fans, there's a little trivia action right there. When did the NFL abolish the bye week? And that was 1966, and then picked it up in 1990.
Wow.
The other weird thing I found about doing this was in 1993, they had 2 bye weeks, but it was kind of an experiment, and they got rid of that quickly. But the funny thing is now they talk about they want to go back to the 2 bye weeks. Mm-hmm. Again, that was something that came out before they went to the 17-game season a couple of years ago. They wanted to have 2 bye weeks, which would have put the Super Bowl sometime in July, I think. I'm not sure, but just kidding around there. But in this particular year, 1966 Eagles season, they had 22 draft picks.
Wow.
So in those rounds, they had 20 rounds. We had 22 players picked. And it was funny because when I looked it up, some of them showed that they signed with the Eagles, but some of them didn't. So I'm like, oh, look. I looked at it. I'm like, we only signed 5 players from our draft that year? Well, that wasn't the case. It just the way that the draft was set up on that particular year, it didn't work that way. So in 1966, it was Pete Retzlaff, who we know is a phenomenal player for us.
Yes.
It was his last season, and in his last season, he had 40 receptions for 653 yards, 16.3 yards a carry, and 6 touchdowns. Okay. And you go, wow, that's pretty good for a guy who's quitting playing. Well, 1965, the year before he retired, he had 66 catches for 1,190 yards, 10 touchdowns, 18 yards per catch. Mm. So, I mean, he was definitely not ready to retire as far as,
isn't that funny? Yeah.
As his play went. And obviously, maybe his body was broken down or anything like that. But, okay, I'm going to wrap this up real quick. So, in 1966, the Eagles did make the playoffs.
Okay.
And here's where it gets kind of weird. This was still when they had the AFL championship and the NFL championship.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay, so in the NFL championship, Green Bay beat Dallas 34-27 in the Cotton Bowl. So they played in Texas.
Yep.
Okay. Then the AFL, Kansas City beat Buffalo 31-7, and that game was played in Buffalo. So it's like the 2 road teams won, but I don't know if their records were. I didn't get that far as why did Daddy play in Texas? But the Eagles ended up playing for 3rd place back in those days, which they used to have a 3rd place game.
Jeez.
It's almost like soccer nowadays, where you see that in some of the tournaments. You're like, oh, but they lost. Yeah, but they get to play in the consolation game.
No.
So anyway, so in Green Bay beat Dallas on New Year's Day, 1967. Okay. Kansas City beat Buffalo New Year's Day in 1967. A week later, on a Monday, the Eagles played the Baltimore Colts on January 8th, 1967. So it was a Monday. I don't know if it was a Monday night because we ended up losing that game 20-14. And then we know that after that, the Super Bowl, the first Super Bowl was played that season. Oh, wow. Green Bay played Kansas City and won 35-10 on January 15th, 1967. So they had like 3 weekends in a row where they had like playoff football games.
Yeah.
So yes, pretty interesting.
Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff there. All right, going on to my season. My season's 80 years ago, 1944. I'm going to go ahead and just say it right away. Eagles were 7-1-2. It was their first ever winning season as the Eagles. Now, I say that as the Eagles because the year before, they were the Steagles, as we all know them as, which is funny because if you know, that was actually never coined by the NFL. So that's actually never was their name. It's never been advertised by the NFL as their name or anything like that, but it's just become the kind of the moniker of it. Even though that was never actually their name. But this was their first winning season as the Eagles by themselves. Funny thing, it shows you just how different like the league is nowadays and how much we've changed in the NFL, which you kind of touched on as well. But some teams that we played that year, we played the Washington Redskins, we played the New York Giants, we played the Chicago Bears, normal stuff right there. We played the Boston Yanks at Fenway Park.
Wow.
We played the Brooklyn Tigers at Ebbets Field. And
that's Eagle Stadium.
No, we were Shibe Park at that point.
Oh.
And then we played the Cleveland Rams at Shibe Park as well. So the Brooklyn Tigers, Boston Yanks, and the Cleveland Rams. It just shows you how different of a time and just how much it's changed. You know what I mean? It's just kind of funny.
So where was the Rams game at?
The Rams game was at Shibe Park. Yeah.
Okay,
it was at home.
We didn't have to take the 3-day train trip to go out to. Can you imagine?
To Cleveland.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that funny. I know. Next thing, two Pro All-Stars they were called back then, and they were both also first-team All-Stars. That was Steve Van Buren and Al Weistert. That's also the year that we drafted Steve Van Buren, who, of course, went on to be, a Hall of Famer and kind of one of the greatest Eagles of all time.
Yeah.
Another funny thing, rookie, Mel Bleeker, drafted the same year as him, or I don't even know if he was drafted by us, but signed or something. Mel Bleeker, he broke what was the NFL top receiver. He was the NFL's top receiver that year. He played 9 games. He started 3 of them. He was second in the NFL in reception, like long reception. That's what they called it, 75 yards. And he was third in touchdowns with 8, which is still the Eagles' all-time rookie record.
Wow.
8 touchdowns as a rookie. It's still the all-time record. He also had the yards per rushing attempt, and he was 4th in the NFL in scrimmage yards and 6th in points scored. He led us in touchdowns and scoring, despite having been mostly a blocking running back in college. He wasn't much of a running back.
That's crazy.
He was more of a blocking guy. But it's just kind of funny. He was our top receiver. He was a halfback. But it's because he wasn't playing halfback that much because it was Steve Van Buren.
Right.
So we almost made him a wide receiver in the NFL.
Right. One of the first.
Exactly. It's so funny how different it is, how weird.
Does it say how many yards he had too, or?
No, I don't have that on here. Sorry.
Just curious.
Yep.
Because the NFL
total yards from scrimmage was 614.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I don't have his broken down running.
Right. Well, because they didn't throw the ball much at all.
Yeah. 614 was 4th in the NFL from scrimmage. I mean, that's 614.
Now they do.
CJ Uzomah is going to get that next year.
It's true.
I could get. No, okay, I'm sorry. Funny little thing I wanted to mention:
true.
Steve Van Buren and Al Weistert. Those were the 2 guys, and they were future Eagles Hall of Famers and retired numbers and some of our greatest players of all time. And I never knew this, but Steve Van Buren, he's a big dude. He was 6 foot, 200 pounds for a running back. Pretty big guy. Al Weistert, his starting offensive lineman, his Hall of Fame tackle. He was 6'1". He was 214 pounds. Wow. Steve Van Buren, I mean, they would almost be indistinguishable.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Jeez.
Like nowadays, you see an offensive lineman, you see Lane Johnson.
Right.
And then next to him is
he's not a running back.
And then next to him is Darren Sproles. Yeah. And you're like, okay, well, they're not playing the same position. Yeah. These guys, 6'1" and 6 foot, and the offensive lineman, he was only 14 pounds heavier. That's indistinguishable.
Wow.
You would have no idea if you saw them next to each other.
That is amazing.
You'd be like, oh, I don't know. That guy might be the running back. I don't know. Isn't that funny? I just realized that. I'm like, how they were small.
And then some of these linemen drafted this year are going to be 6'7", 350.
Oh yeah, well,
crazy.
That's crazy. Tyler Guyton, he's 6'8", right? I can't remember. Let me see. Tyler Guyton, he's 6'8". And then there's other guys, even the guards we're talking about. Oh, they're smaller. They're 6'4",
Yeah.
J.C. Latham's 6'6". I mean, it's insane. Fashanu is 6'6". These guys are enormous. And they're 312 pounds. Right. He was 214.
That's nuts. Yeah.
You got anything else on any historic stuff or any talk like that or about the Eagles?
Not really. It's just crazy to me about the bye week. I would have never believed that the old timer games, they would have had a bye week.
Yeah. And our coach that year was Greasy Neal, who's considered to be possibly the greatest Eagles coach of all time, unfortunately. And we had 2 byes, week 1 and week 3.
That's nuts.
Yeah. Let me touch on some other sports. Do you have anything to say about the Eagles at all anymore?
No, I'm good. I'm ready.
All right. Some other sports, the 76ers in the playoffs of the 7th seed. They lost their first game against the Knicks last night. We went and watched it at Frankie's with Steve and my mom and everything, and it was fun to watch, but it was a bummer they couldn't pull it out. Embiid got hurt again. I'm coming to the point where it's just hard. I don't know. It's just hard to watch.
As good as he is.
It's hard to watch sometimes. I mean, it's just really more so sad than anything because we're missing out on a generational scorer. I mean, he played 39 games this year. He averaged 34 points a game.
Yeah. For a big man like that.
He's the all-time he's the all-time leader in points per minute. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, that's dumb. But no, points per minute. Minutes played in his career, he scores the most points per minute played.
Wow.
I mean, that's insane. And it's just a bummer because he's constantly hurt, and it's a bummer for everyone that we're missing out on really what could be the greatest scorer of all time.
Right.
I'm just going to go ahead and say that. He has more points per minute than Jordan, Kobe, Doncic is coming up there now, but it's unbelievable. I've never seen anybody like him, and it just sucks because he gets hurt all the time. Yeah. It's just really unfortunate, but hopefully he can come back. They can pull out this win. But I don't know.
Win the series
at this point. Once he goes down, once I see him go down over the playoffs every year, I'm like, well,
yeah.
I just
and he's a big catalyst for the team, like you said, his big scorer. but he's also the big man. He's also the guy dishing the ball off. He's shooting threes.
Well, the rebounder, his defense, which bothered me last night. He shot 8 threes. I'm like, he should never be shooting 8 threes. Why are they letting him shoot that much?
I remember the one where it just looked to me like his feet weren't set. He didn't have his step.
He couldn't jump last
and that was early when he first came back. He did look better as the game went on. But when he shot a 3, and it just looked like a half-hearted effort. And I kind of went, "What's he?" I yelled it, and you were like, "Shut up, Dad!" But
basketball, we don't yell at basketball. All right, Phillies, they're 14-8. They just swept the White Sox about a few minutes ago. The game just ended 8-2. Schwarbaum had another homer. So that's awesome. And then Alec Boehm's
the bats were coming alive too.
They are.
Weekend,
Alec Boehm's been on a tear. He had 3 hits today.
He had a bomer.
He had 2 home runs the other day, and both 3-run homers.
Wow.
Real Muto is kind of the one that's in the slump right now, and Castellanos is having a hard time this season. But
how about
everyone else
shortstop?
Trey Turner, he's been amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
He got a hit today. I think that's 9 games in a row now that he has an extra base hit. So he's been unbelievable.
So that's good.
He brought his batting average up incredibly. So
it's weird early in the season. They're batting 210. You're like, oh my God. Well, he's only had 40 at bats.
Exactly.
Let's get it up to 100, then we'll see.
That's the thing. So they're looking good. They're 14-8, and like I said, they got the sweep, so that's awesome. The Union, they're 3-0-4. They play on Saturday coming up this week, and then the Flyers, there's nothing to talk about there because their season's over.
Yep.
I mean, the only good thing about that is now I don't have to pay attention to hockey anymore.
True. I mean, it's tough because we do have some hockey fans out there. But
during the season, I just it's hard for me. It's the hardest sport for me to understand. I just don't grasp onto it. And paying attention to the Flyers this year, it was fun to see them doing well and everything. But now that it's over, I'm like, okay, I don't have to really focus on hockey as much.
I get you. I get you.
You got anything else, my friend?
Not really, no. We're good.
Let's say our goodbyes. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. If you like our Eagles Therapy podcast, do us a favor. Rate and subscribe wherever you're listening to your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and comment down below who you think the Eagles are going to draft, who you think your favorite team's going to draft, what we should trade out, what we should do draft day. And we hope to see you at Frankie's, everyone. But you can email us our questions at oureaglestherapy@gmail.com. But other than that, from all of us here at Our Eagles Therapy Podcast, my name is Basil.
And I'm Baz.
Go Birds.
And fly, Eagles, fly.